I call Phil Twyford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess the first thing to say about the first clauses of the bill is that the most notable thing is that the commencement clause is retrospective, and the Act is deemed to have come into force on the day it was introduced, that is the 23rd of February 2015. And I mean, the observation that you have to make at this point is that this bill is a fix of a fix, and it's a desperate kind of last-minute scramble to fix a couple of problems with this bill in the 4 months before the Act is set to expire. Now, you know, we've said we're supporting it. We've said that we agree with the intent of the bill, the original Act and this bill, but you know, retrospective commencement is never a good thing. It always raises questions, I think, about the quality of the process, and I think also the fact that it's happening so late in the piece before the expiry of the Act, the Weathertight Homes Services Act. Begs the question of why the government has taken so long to progress this and why it's really being tidied up at the last minute. We've had over the last hour or so some reflections on both sides of the House about this issue, which has been one of the dominating issues of political life in this country over the last 20 years, really. And the Honourable Clayton Cosgrove, who has taken part in this debate as the bill has gone through the House, has reminded the House on a number of occasions that the Honourable Dr Nick Smith sat in these opposition benches day after day and screamed at the government of the day, "Why don't you just write a cheque?" But he learned, as his colleagues did as well in government, that the issue is not quite as simple as that. And although the Honourable Maurice Williamson, as the then Building and Construction Minister, proudly trumpeted on the front pages of the newspapers this billion-dollar package that was going to solve the leaky homes problem. Great largesse. What have we seen? Actually, it's been a veritable trickle of homeowners who have come forward to avail themselves of the benefits of the funding assistance package for Weathertight homes. And I don't mean to trivialise that. It has provided those homeowners a useful alternative to litigation and adjudication, and the expense and the uncertainty of going down that track. It's provided them with an alternative. As of a year ago, the official figures were only 87 leaky homes had been fixed. The ministry said at the time that it had approved repair plans for another 364, and there were 3,000, I think, in the pipeline that had been approved for as having qualified for assistance. But it is a far cry from Maurice Williamson's billion-dollar package, and I'm not aware of the dollar figure that has been spent by under the funding assistance package. Perhaps the Minister could just say, because I'm sure he's got that number at his fingertips, but I don't think it's very much. And the lion's share of the appropriation for this funding assistance package has long since been siphoned off for other activities. So it's been said in this debate, I think there's been some reflection on the follies of deregulation, and there's been something of a cross-party consensus in recent years that we need to continue to fine-tune and develop the Building Act and try to find the right balance between protecting consumers, between trying to raise the quality standards in the building and construction industry without imposing undue and unnecessary compliance burdens on the industry. And that is an ongoing process. But it was disturbing to hear the Honourable Paula Bennett, then Minister of Local Government, come to this House last year and declare that New Zealand has moved on and was over the leaky homes, Mr Chairman.
Phil Twyford.
Apparently, according to Paula Bennett, we've moved on. We're over the leaky homes crisis. Nothing could be further from the truth. And as Ron Mark was saying, the whole problem of leaky homes is actually a much bigger problem of shoddy building, poor building and systemic breakdown, and deregulation is part of that. And I trust the Minister is aware of what Auckland Council has described as an epidemic of shoddy building in Auckland at the moment, as an industry that is very poorly equipped and lacks the capability to scale up and meet the demand pressures in Auckland, as that Minister well knows, because he wakes up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat worrying about the lack of houses, of actual houses. I don't mean consents, I don't mean subdivisions, I don't mean consented sections, I mean actual houses that people can live in. That Minister knows more painfully than probably anybody in this House how ill-equipped the industry is to meet the furious demand pressures that we see in Auckland at the moment. And one of the consequences of that, the inability of the industry to scale up, is the shoddy building that Auckland Council says is responsible for something like 30 to 40% of building consents being failed at the moment. And it's because the industry lacks skilled personnel, and there's so much work on that you've got people who are underqualified and who are not properly supervised to do the work that they're doing. So we're also seeing, as Ron Mark was, I think, alluding to, we're also seeing a lot of multi-title buildings that were built in the 1990s, blocks of apartments and flats that are now coming horribly unstuck, and a Unit Titles Act that is simply not fit for purpose, that simply cannot do the job, is exposing residents in those blocks of apartments to financial catastrophe because they are being hit with huge repair bills. And particularly what we're seeing is older New Zealanders who sold up and invested whatever asset they had into a flat or an apartment. They are being hit with massive repair bills. They are part of bodies corporate who haven't had adequate long-term repair plans. Or the repair plans are not funded properly. They've got poor governance standards, and people are being driven to bankruptcy, and it's a hideous situation. And I would hope, sir, that in the spirit of the funding assistance package, that the Minister and his government would consider providing on a case-by-case basis appropriate assistance to people who find themselves in situations through no fault of their own, but it's an exact parallel to the leaky homes problem that this legislation seeks to correct, the injustice that it seeks to fix, that the Minister would exercise a kind of case-by-case and compassionate approach to assisting people who find themselves in those situations. It's not just leaky homes. We're seeing large numbers of apartment buildings that have been built in breach of fire standards. And frankly, I'm amazed, given the data that's coming out on this issue at the moment, I'm amazed there hasn't been catastrophe and loss of human life, because some of these buildings were built with such appalling breach of the fire standards. So Paula Bennett's wrong. We haven't moved on from the leaky homes catastrophe, and any move to self-certification of building work, or in fact contracting out and privatising the consenting process, as has been raised by the Minister in the past, would be absolutely mad and would demonstrate that, that this Minister hasn't learned the lessons of history. It's not just the EQC repairs that have thrown up so many cases of shoddy building. It's happening in Auckland right now, and the lesson that we have to draw from this is that we have to be ever vigilant. We've got to ensure that there are decent regulations and protections. If the minister's hint that he is considering, and I think this is what he was suggesting, if the minister's hint that they're going to look at an insurance-backed proposal, then we would welcome that.